G'day guys, I suppose you're wondering what on earth this contraption is, and I'm going to call it the Hendriks Hive. And the reason I call it the Hendriks Hive is that this design comes from a YouTuber, beekeeper in Northern Ontario, and his YouTube site is called A Beekeeper in Northern Ontario. You should go and check him out. And he's experimenting with an unusual design of hive which is designed to solve a specific problem. He hasn't just designed one, he's actually designed 7 different variations, and he's put bees in them in his summer that's just been to see if they work. Now, he had a few issues with his bees this season, so he didn't have very many bees. A lot of the hives he had were young, and so he didn't really get a good chance to test it. So what I've offered to do is to take the design that he thinks the most likely to work, build it here, and give it a go in our summer, so that he can watch that, and you can all watch it too and see if it works. Now, the thing about designing hives is, or designing innovative hives, is that every beekeeper's got their own theories about how things work and what will work and what won't work. At the end of the day, none of that matters. All that matters is what do the bees think about it. So putting bees in it and trying it is really the only thing you can do to either confirm that your design works, or refute it and prove that it doesn't work, or maybe come up with some modifications to fine-tune it. Now, there's plenty of scope for that. So before I go any further, what I need to do is to explain what is the problem that Scott, so it's Scott Hendriks, and this is the Hendriks Hive. What is the problem that Scott is trying to solve? And the issue is that when you have a hive in midsummer in full honey flow, collecting honey, a traditional hive, the honey supers sit on top of the brood box, and if you're having a good season you might have 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes above it, which makes getting into the brood chamber to check the brood chamber very difficult. Now, what a lot of commercial beekeepers do to solve that problem is they just don't go into the brood chamber. What that means is that they don't spot swarming if it's going to happen, they don't spot queen problems, and so as a result they inevitably lose some hives that they could have otherwise saved. Now, before I go any further too, the other thing I want to stress is that I don't see this, and I don't think Scott does either, as a solution for commercial beekeepers. If you are a hobby beekeeper, or if you just have a small number of hives and you want to be able to get into your brood chamber and you don't want to have to go through all the heavy work of lifting all those boxes off, for some people that's just a drag. For other people it's actually just not practical, because lifting those heavy boxes full of honey is something they only want to do once when they harvest. They don't want to be doing it every time they want to check the brood box. So what have we got here? I have made some components roughly copying Scott's design, although to be fair, because I'm just using some scrap wood from around my workshop, mine isn't identical to the way I've configured it isn't identical to the way he's done it, in that when I break it down I'll talk about what the key differences are. After I built the bits yesterday, I painted them, and so by chance the painted bits are the bits that I built. The painted in this colour are the bits that I built. These are just standard boxes, no different from anything else. Even the base is just one of my normal bases that I've modified a little bit. And in fact, this box here is just a standard honey super. You notice I'm using 3/4 honey supers. The only thing different about it is that it has this, which you can't see at the moment very well, a strip of wood across there to shed water. Okay, and here's the thing. Your brood chamber sits in this bottom box here. The bees can come up and into the honey supers up here. This box here is just a spacer. If you want to know more about Scott's designs and what his thinking is, he's posted a series of videos, one video per design, explaining what his thinking is and what all the different options that he's tried are. What you'll see in a minute is that the bees exit from that side of the hive. So that's, if you like, the front of the hive. That's facing where the bees are flying to, which means you're right round, when you're working the brood box, you're right round the back, and this lid lifts off, and there are the brood frames. So you can get straight into this brood chamber without touching the honey supers. But this particular design allows the bees to flow through from the brood box into the honey supers by overlapping slightly, which does mean that you've got one brood box frame underneath, which is quite difficult to get to. It is possible to get it out, but it's not easy. Having said that, in most of my hives the brood sits in the middle of the brood chamber and the outside frames are typically just honey. So if you're inspecting your brood, the need to get that one frame on the end out may not exist. On the other hand, it may do. So let me just break down what the parts are. I'm not going to put bees in this box today, in this video. What I am going to do is shoot another video once I've populated this brood box with a good strong hive, and once I've put the first honey supers on. Now it's still very early spring here, so I'm not expecting my bees to be going up into a honey super and putting up honey until the flow starts, which isn't until late November, December here in southern New Zealand. So this is a preliminary video, if you like, to explain what I've done, so that you can, when you see the next video, you'll understand, you'll be able to come back and look at this video to look at the components of this. So I'll just break it down. Any old lid, whatever lid you use on top. Just a standard super. So the idea of this lid is simply to shed water out to one side. Any water that hits, if you get rain coming from this side of the hive, runs down the supers, it'll get shed off that block of wood onto this roof and off. So your honey super, sorry, your brood box stays dry. Then we get into the meat of it. I haven't got any frames in this honey super, but I've got queen excluder here, and if I just slide it backwards a wee bit, and I'll come and pick the camera up and just demonstrate the amount of space that the bees have got to get from the brood chamber up is quite narrow in this design. I could increase the size of that by putting a shim in here, but then that leaves a space for the bees to build burcomb, is that the right word for it? Wax on top, and that means having to constantly clean it out. If my first try with bees in here shows me that the bees haven't got enough space to get up, then I shall quite simply put that shim in. So in my first instance, I think that there's enough room there. Now let me see if I can just demonstrate this to you. So I'm using the queen excluder as a guide to show you where the honey super comes down, and because the queen excluder's got a bar on it there, the actual space for the bees to get through is only this gap here. Now I can manipulate the size of that gap a little bit by the placement of that frame, or even by putting a shim down in there to keep it back off. Now I showed this to a friend of mine who's a beekeeper, and like every beekeeper, we've all got opinions about how things should be done, and he immediately said that isn't enough space and there won't be enough room for the bees to get through there. My response to that was that my hives, if I walk around to this side, my hives only ever have an entrance that big. I don't put a full entrance right across the hive like a lot of beekeepers. Now I can get away with that here in southern New Zealand, because in the summertime the number of days we get that get up to 30 degrees is quite limited. Let me just put this camera back onto a stand. So the hive's overheating isn't a big problem. I don't get I get bedding in the peak of summer, like most beekeepers do, but offsetting that, we can get cold weather all the way through, and I find that those smaller entrances are fine. The entrances that I have in my hives are 120 mils wide by about, on most hives, about probably no more than 20 mils. The entrance on this hive is 40 mils high, which I may reduce down. Now, if you work out the square area of space that the bees have got in that entrance to come and go, and my experience is that they come and go just fine. There's never any traffic jams at the entrance. They find their way in and out without any problem. That's actually equal to the area in this slip, which is why my theory is that that'll be enough space for them to get from here up to the top. But it's my theory. I use the word theory deliberately because that's all it is. I'm going to put some bees in there and put that theory to the test. And until I've done that, that's all it is, a theory. If you watch 628 Dirt Roosters cutouts, or Mr. Ed, Jeff Hirshoff, you will see that when they cut hives out of buildings, the hives are frequently in a cavity, and when they fill that cavity, they move over to the next cavity. And often the access they've got between the two cavities is just a tiny little hole. So I don't believe that this is going to be an impediment, and time will tell. We'll put it to the test. Now let me just keep breaking this down to explain what the components are. So this is just a standard deep brood box, nothing unusual about that. This box here is simply a spacer. Now I've made this in two parts, a base and the spacer box. You could easily make this as one component, no problem at all. And it's made out of absolutely rough wood. But all it is a spacer. It's got a rim on it to give the bees some bee space on three sides. No rim on this side because this is where the bees are coming and going. And the key point to it is that it's built, well actually this box is built at a standard 240 millimeters, which is how tall I make my deep boxes, simply because when I'm done with this trial I want to repurpose the wood that's in this to make a deep box. The sides, not the ends, because the ends are too short. The bit underneath, the base, is made to exactly the right height, so that that plus that, in other words this height here, is exactly level with the top of the brood box. And that's really the only tricky thing involved in building this. Once you get that bit right, then the rest falls into place. Now what I've done is I've taken one of my standard bases and I've cut an entranceway in the side. My bees normally come and go through the end of the hive. In this case they're going to come and go from the hive out the side. That's not a problem. There are beehives like that all over the world and they work fine. I have no doubts about that. If I take this box off, this base here has a tunnel up the middle of it. Don't know if you can see through there. And that just lines up with that. So that's the concept. What I'm interested in, and probably the main reason that I've put this video together, is that there's still plenty of scope both for me and for Scott to refine this. So tell us what you think about it. Put a comment down below. Do you think this will work? Do you think it won't work? We won't know until probably Christmas time, when we'll get a feel for whether the bees are doing what they're supposed to be doing or not. I fully expect there'll be lots of different opinions, and I welcome that because it's good to hear them. In particular, if you've done anything like this before, then drop a comment below, tell us what you did, and tell us, did it work, didn't it work? Anyway, before I go, I'll just reassemble this, show you that it all slots together pretty easily. Lid slides in underneath there like that, and then pile your honey supers up on top, and then a lid on top of that. Well guys, thanks for watching.